Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to ANF Plus Sports Tonight. I'm sports producer Scott Pennyman here with the great Fred
Oh,
Campagna.
wow. Appreciate that, Scott.
That was a good one, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't even need that kind of introduction, but I'm happy when I get it. Nah, thanks for having me on again, and
Absolutely.
looking forward to talking about some of the topics that we have tonight. So plenty to get to.
It's Thursday, so you know how we do it on Thursday. We just jump right into it, right? So
Okay.
normally, like I always joke around when Fred's here, it's normally a pure basketball night, and we're going to get to some basketball for sure. However, this caught my eye, Matt Ryan, right? So, obviously, former Falcons great quarterback, Matt Ryan. I think early in the week he said he was going to CBS, was going to be on, but he didn't rule out playing some football next year.
It's the Jay Cutler method. Isn't that what Jay Cutler did?
He just danced around for some years and then just decided.
He was going to go in the booth. Didn't he come out of the booth? I think he might have come out of the booth. I think he might have been in the booth for a minute with CBS and then came out of the booth because he decided he liked playing football better. But, so what do you think about that? I mean, do you think
Well, look.
What did he say? He just left the door open? He isn't officially filing his papers to retire?
Yeah, now I think the real reason, and this is kind of as I was continuing to read the article a little bit, it more so said right now the Colts owe him $12 million for next season.
Okay.
They cut him. So if he retires, if he says I'm retired, then he wouldn't get the $12 million because he'd be a retired player and he'd retire on his own. So now he's got to keep the door. He obviously has to keep the door open and say, well, sure, I'll play if someone calls me so he can get that money from the Colts. So so I get it. I totally understand it. Now from a pure football standpoint, every indication when you watch Matt Ryan the last few years, it looks like he's done. I mean, when you saw him with the Colts last year, they got him thinking that he was going to be their piece to maybe contend for a Super Bowl, or as far as the Colts go, he was like their latest old retread quarterback that they would sign. They kind of do that like every year.
Yeah.
And so last year he started the season as a starter, got benched, and then when Jeff Saturday took over as the head coach, he brought him back, then got benched again. So it looked like he was done. I mean, there's nothing that you can see from him. So late in the season, I think for the playoffs, they had him on CBS as an analyst. Did a pretty good job. They decided to bring him on for next year. To me, I think he should just stay in the booth.
Yeah, I think that's probably what will happen. I mean, the $12 million is a good reason to not follow your retirement papers. So can't blame him on that one. And, look at the stats from last year. I mean, they were pedestrian. It was his worst quarterback rating since 2009. So he was not good. He wasn't horrendous. His stats were probably a little bit better than the eye test. You know what I'm saying? Just watching him, you're right. He looked very immobile back there. Yeah. One of the easiest quarterbacks in the league to sack, if not the easiest quarterback in the league to sack. So once that starts to happen, you're probably right about him just, saying, let me just make sure I get this $12 million.
And then walk away.
And then I'll file those papers as soon as that check clears.
Yeah, obviously in the prime of his career, he's probably the best quarterback the Falcons have ever had. I mean, some people probably him or Mike Vick. I mean, statistically, I think Matt Ryan was probably way better than Mike Vick was. So so I guess it's always hard. He was drafted, I think it was 2008. So it's always hard to want to walk away. Obviously, when you feel like you have something left in the tank. But I didn't really watch him last year and get the idea that he had anything back in the tank. But as we put this story in, I was thinking about this. How crazy would it be for the Falcons to bring him in to end his career here as a veteran mentor for Desmond Ridder?
Very.
Make sense?
Crazy.
I'm just saying.
Doesn't make any sense. No, I don't. I highly doubt that. Just because you don't want the shadow of Matt Ryan over Ridder.
That's true.
So I think that's probably why you wouldn't, because he just cast that shadow. So
that's true.
But listen, Matt Ryan is one of the all-time great Falcons players, not just quarterbacks. League MVP. The Super Bowl. It's too bad because what happened in that Super Bowl does tarnish things a little bit.
28-3.
Not necessarily his fault. He did have the strip sack, which was the big play,
right.
But it was more play calling. I think most Falcons fans would agree than anything else in that game. And just a super guy in the community, still very involved, and just a good guy overall. So I think that for Matt Ryan going forward, he'll be the guy who when he's at the Benz, it'll be a big deal, and and I think he'll be a good broadcaster too.
So my last thing about him, about Matt, when you look back, just looking back, let's assume he's done. So looking back at his career, Matt, in the last era, Matt was a top what quarterback? I mean, would you put him up there with the best quarterbacks? Would you put him up there with obviously no one's on Tom Brady's level, but when you start thinking about the better quarterbacks of his era, where would you have Matt Ryan?
He's a tier below Brady, Rodgers, Breeze, if you want to go with like guys roughly his age, not go with the younger guys. I put him, I would put him talent-wise in like the Ben Roethlisberger, but Roethlisberger's got a little more hardware than he does. So,
for sure.
That there's that aspect of it. But I would put him kind of in that group, I guess. I don't know. Where would you put him?
Probably right about there. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, obviously you can't put him with Drew Brees and Peyton Manning and those guys in that era just because they accomplished so much.
Right.
But when you look at statistically, I'm probably putting him maybe right close to like maybe a notch below Phillip Rivers. I mean, kind of like, Rivers was a guy who put up tons of numbers with the Chargers.
I think they're very comparable. I think it's a great comparison. Maybe Rivers' numbers at the end of his career could be a little bit better, but maybe they threw a little bit more. But that's a great comparison. Neither guy ever won anything.
Right.
Both guys tried to switch teams late in their career.
Right.
Both guys switched teams to the Colts late in their career, and it didn't really work out. So I think that's a great comparison right there. And I think a lot of people, would have been a lot of teams would have loved to have either of those guys as their quarterback for a decade plus, like the Falcons did. So now it's just, is Desmond Ridder going to be the guy to take over? And I guess we'll find that out. But what about some other? We got another
smooth transition from a has-been quarterback to a guy who's trying to start his career, the beloved character around here, Stetson Bennett. So, you know how these things go. He had one of his first practices this week with the Rams, and fans go crazy because he throws a couple really nice darts downfield to an absolutely unguarded Van Jefferson, and like.
So wait a minute, let me get this straight. He was wearing like shorts around midfield with a football on a beautiful Southern California day.
Beautiful, no pass
An
rush.
NFL wide receiver ran straight down the field, and he threw the ball to him, and he caught it.
He caught it, right?
Okay.
He was able, an unguarded
incredible.
NFL wide receiver.
This is. I'll have to look up. No, I've seen the video. I mean, yeah, exactly. I agree with you 100%, Scott. Like, so there were people who were like, "Oh, wow," and it's also shot from an angle that I was trying to get. I think it was like 50 yards in the air.
Right. Yeah.
If you get drafted into the NFL, you should be able to throw the ball 50 yards in the air. So I was failing to see anything too spectacular about it. I also did notice there were two passes actually.
Yeah.
The second one, Sean McVay was in coverage on it. So that tells you how competitive things were. The head coach was about 5 yards behind the wide receiver trying to get, catch up.
The head coach, who was a former college wide receiver, wasn't even a defensive back there in college work. Yeah. Look, I mean, when you think about Stetson Bennett, obviously no matter what he does, it's really going to follow him. He's one of the most celebrated or decorated college quarterbacks, certainly of his era. So no matter what he does, it's going to make huge news, especially for fans around here. So, I mean, I think people are just – it just shows how anxious people are just to see what kind of pro quarterback he could be. We're probably going to wait a little bit.
I was looking at the replies to that video on Twitter. Always fun to go into the replies. And there were an awful lot of UGA fans that said, it's all he does is win, so he's going to make it in this league and this, that, and the other. We shall see. This is the NFL. It's completely different.
For sure.
So we shall see on that one. I think Stetson Bennett was a great college quarterback.
Absolutely.
He was a great fit for UGA, where he just needed to do what the offense called for.
Right. They didn't depend on him. They didn't put the games on his back and say go win.
Exactly.
Right.
But when he did need to do some stuff, he did, especially the last couple of years.
For sure.
Prior to that, he had a big reputation for not necessarily getting it done in those key moments at times. Yeah. Emily can speak to that, I think, a little bit more. She pointed that out a lot before they won the first national championship.
Yeah.
And the other thing that he did remarkably was spend 7 years in college and not graduate. So
that's wild, man.
That in itself. Although I have to say, on that note, we didn't talk about it. I think you might have talked about it earlier, and I don't know if it's like official that he never graduated. But I will say, not a great look for the program overall. Like, for real.
Well, they've had a few
for
things
real, because that long in college, you can understand a guy who plays the 3 years and then decides to get out, not graduating. You can even understand a guy who played all before. But for him to be there for that long, I don't think it's a great look for the program. I don't think it's a great look for the university, to have a student matriculating allegedly, for that long and actually going to classes and never get enough to get a degree.
Bro, I was like sort of embarrassed to tell people that it took me like 5.5 years to graduate college. Yeah. And I didn't have a scholarship.
Yeah.
I didn't have a scholarship to go. I had to pay for it out of pocket.
Right.
So
I went 7 myself, but I picked up 2 degrees for it.
So, right. I mean, that's a total difference. I mean, he went 7 and apparently didn't pick up 1. So that's kind of wild. I don't even know how you do that. How do you even be in school for 7 years and don't even run across a degree at some point? That's kind of crazy. So
that's my point.
Yeah, that's wild.
Like, you would think that somebody within the administration of either the football program or the school itself, the academic advising counselor, somebody would be like, all right, let's just connect all these dots, and Stetson, you have this degree.
Right. Just get you, and you're an athlete, and you can't get graduated. You're Stetson Bennett. You can't just talk to somebody and say, all right, let's give him some extra credit here. Just
purely for optics, purely for optics. Because if he can play it all, back to the football part of it, if he can play it all, he will have a career in the league as a backup. Yeah. And then that'll be the way they pay backups now. Oh, it's good enough that if you can get a half a dozen years as a backup in the NFL, you're doing pretty well.
Look, it's all jokes. We're just here making jokes. He won't need that degree. Chances are. I mean, if he's like Chase Daniel as a backup quarterback in the NFL and he makes $40 or $50 million, that degree won't mean anything. So
look, have a quick drink here.
Yeah, for sure. So, moving on from Stetson Bennett, once Fred gathers himself over there, we're going to talk some NBA.
Right. Oh, I heard a choking joke from our producer, Rhett.
That was very appropriate timing when you look at the Celtics last night, Game 1.
Yeah.
I mean, why does this always I don't know, man. It's just something when you look at the Celtics so far in these playoffs where it just seemed like something's just not right. Look, I mean.
These playoffs, you can go back to ever since it's been Tatum and Brown, this is what they do.
It's kind of crazy because when you look at Tatum and Brown and you look at the talent on the team, like I said, I think they're about as deep and talented as any team in the NBA. Probably the favorites, I think the favorites to win the NBA championship when you look at what they have and looking at where they went last year. So that's kind of like the natural next step. And it just sort of seems like they just can't get out of their own way sometimes. I mean, like that effort last night, especially down the stretch, it just wasn't. I mean, the coach, Joe Mazzulla, got so frustrated he threw his clipboard down and just kind of walked away. I mean, why do they do this?
So, I don't know. They don't know. Tatum was asked about it, said, why are you 11-11 at home in the last 2 postseasons? He didn't have an answer for it. I think that the casual fans watch. You watch half the game, you're like, oh, man, these Celtics are pretty much unbeatable.
Right.
And then you flip it back on, or if you have YouTube TV and it crashes and then it comes back, you're like, wait, how'd they lose?
Yeah.
But the thing is, Miami last year in that playoff series there were a lot of big quarters. Sometimes the Celtics had a huge first quarter. Sometimes the Heat had a huge first quarter. And it was a year ago yesterday that the Heat, Game 1 against the Celtics, Eastern Conference Finals, were down 13. Yesterday they were down 13.
Yeah.
Ended up winning. Used a big third quarter to do it. Last year they outscored the Celtics by 25 in the third quarter. Last night they outscored them, I think, by 21. The Celtics did get back. They got back to within, I think, 4. With like 4 minutes to go, and then just completely fell apart after that. So, be honest with you, I don't want to say I'm nervous, but I'm not sure what to take out of that game because the Heat are a little bit different because of Spoelstra, because of Jimmy Butler, because of Bam, because of how many times the Celtics and Heat have played.
Very familiar with each other.
Very familiar with each other. So I kind of knew what Philadelphia was, and even after the James Harden game, it was like, all right, well, James Harden just had an incredible game. What's the odds he's going to do that in the second game? Jimmy Butler was great, but he wasn't above and beyond like we've seen him before.
Yeah.
So it's pretty close to a must-win, Game 2 Friday night.
Yeah, it's just when watching the game last night, there were periods where I thought the Celtics were going to run away with it. I remember peeking in, and they were up by like 12 or 13 points. And then just like that, a few minutes later, I looked down, it was a tie ball game. I'm like, wow, really what happened? Just when I watch this Celtics team, I don't know if they just know, if they have that level of confidence where they know they can come back. They know that they're good enough to be able to come back in these series, so they really don't sweat it. I mean, they were down 3-2 last series, went on the road, beat Philly in a tough one. I mean, they took that game 6 down to the last. I mean, that a lot of that game we thought they were going to lose.
Right, exactly. They definitely stared the offseason right in the face with that one.
And they
got through it. And I thought that because of that, they'd come out in this series and be focused. But, again, whenever this happens with the Celtics, one thing that I do notice, especially locally, but even nationally, is like, wow, what is wrong with the Celtics? You got to give the Heat a little bit of credit, too. They made everything in the third quarter. Their defense was good. Their rebounding was good. Kevin Love was throwing, 85-foot outlet passes right on the, dropping dimes.
That's what he does.
But that's and they made all their 3-pointers. Guys like Martin, the Strus point guard. The kid who plays over Lowry, I don't know why is his name escaping me, but anyway, he they were all making their shots in the third quarter. So they used a run, and then they're good enough to play from ahead. They might be the best team left at playing from ahead because Jimmy Butler is a great passer. He can still get to his spots and score. And guys like he and Kyle Lowry can really control the tempo in the last 5 minutes of the game. And their record in the regular season was very good in close games.
Yeah, so. I mean, it's just when you watch that Miami Heat team, look, that's the kind of team I would hate to play in the playoffs. Not because they're so hugely talented. Like when you play against LeBron and AD, you know those guys are talented. So, I mean, you kind of know what you're facing. But Miami is just a scrappy team. They never give up. They play really hard. They just have a grinded-out style that if you're playing against a team like that, it can be kind of frustrating just because they never go away. They're going to, for 48 minutes, 53 if necessary, they're going to go hard.
But I disagree with that slightly. If they're in the game, they will. I think Miami and Jimmy Butler, they're the type of team that if you can get up 18 on them in the third quarter, they might be like, oh, you know what? Just get them next game. It's a 7-game series. We didn't get this one. We'll get them next game. But they did that last year. I think if the Celtics, and like you said, it was 12-13, it was 10, but then it would be down to 6.
Right.
And then at the start of the third quarter, it quickly got down to a tie game, and then the Heat actually took a pretty decent lead for a while. So the Heat are the type of team that you need to put away, by mid to late in the third quarter, have them down by 15, and then it's a different story. They're not really a comeback team in the sense that the Celtics can be a team that can be down 12, make a run like they did last night and get it close. But the Heat, I don't think is that kind of team necessarily.
The Miami Heat is like an NFL. If in football terms, the Miami Heat is kind of like that team where they're really tough. They'll beat you up front with their offensive line. They like to run the ball. They'll run the clock down the way. But if they get down by 21 points, you probably have the game won.
I agree.
That's kind of what the Miami Heat is. They're just really but you really have to stay in it and mentally engage when you play against them just because they are so mentally tough. I mean, not just when you think about their organization as a whole. Pat Riley, Eric Spoelstra was a really good coach, but when you really look at their organization, they have tough, scrappy sort of players. They have Miami Heat type players, Kyle Lowry, Jimmy Butler.
Heat culture. So speaking of the physicality that you talked about, extremely physical game, completely different than the Western Conference, which we'll talk about in a second. But, very physical. I think you may see a quicker whistle in game 2 because there were an awful lot of screens that were being set by the Heat players where there was some arm hooking going on, and then it ends up looking like an offensive foul, or it ends up looking like a foul against the Celtics because the guy's arm is hooked. So I think that, they'll probably clean that stuff up. But that's just a testament to how crafty, guys like Lowry are.
Sure.
Bam will do it as well, and Butler's not, he's prone to doing that also. But that's just part of being a veteran in the league. You take whatever advantage you can get. So it should be a fun series, and it's crazy to think that the Hawks went into Miami and not just beat them in that play-in game, but pretty handily beat them. And then Chicago, that game was very tight until late,
right.
and then the Heat pulled it out. So the Heat were this close to going from, should have been the 7 seed to on the golf course a month ago.
Look, if you're the NBA, that's a total endorsement for the play-in tournament because you have 2 teams right now that are alive in the Western and Eastern Conference Finals that both participated in the play-in and they're still playing right now.
Let's talk about that other one.
Let's talk about them. We got the Lakers, man. I feel like we were just keeping the seat warm to talk about that series. I mean, obviously, Denver Nuggets up 1-0, held on for the win the other night. Game 2, what do you expect?
I actually expect the Nuggets to play well again tonight. I think this is one of those series that will hold form on the home courts through the first 4 games.
Yeah.
And then things get interesting in games 5, 6, and 7. But I do think that the Nuggets will win again tonight to go up 2-0. I think the Nuggets will struggle to win in Los Angeles, either of those games. Jokic is great. I was saying it like Jokic is like a dream come true if you were going to go to the Y or to the rec center at your college and like run 5-on-5.
Yeah.
Like that's the guy you want on your team.
Yeah.
I mean, he just gets
Very
everybody
skillful.
involved. He moves the ball quickly. He plays the game right, and he was awesome. AD was very good though well.
He had 40.
So he had a big game. The Lakers, it was a very entertaining game. I think somebody's got to start playing some defense in that series at some point. But I do, again, like the Nuggets tonight.
Well, I like the Lakers to win this game. I like the Lakers to win game 2. But if you are a Lakers fan, here's something that could be a little bit alarming. So when you look at their, the numbers from last game, AD, 40 points. LeBron James, 26 and almost had a triple-double. You got bench contributions from Austin Reeves. He had, I think, 23 or 24. You got contributions from Rui Hachimura. He had a nice game.
Yep.
You had everything fall into place, which normally equals a Lakers win.
You didn't play
everything
defense,
that they would
though.
need. Right. Not enough defense. But from an offensive standpoint, you got everything that you normally would need for the Lakers to win a tough game on the road like that, and they lost. Yeah. So it kind of makes you wonder, like, I know all those guys can equally contribute game after game, and I think that's what the Lakers are. But you have to wonder, you hit them with a pretty good shot in game 1, and you lost that game, and you were behind a lot, for a lot of that game until they made that run late. So, yeah, I do expect the Lakers to win tonight. I think they'll find a way to bounce back. They kind of found something late last game with Hachimura guarding Jokic, and that way Anthony Davis was able to kind of do what he's done best the entire playoffs, which is kind of play help defense and block shots around the rim. Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how the Nuggets sort of counter that, but I do expect the Lakers to find a way to win tonight. I don't know if it's going to be, contributions from D'Angelo Russell, who, he's kind of – he's a hit-or-miss sort of player. Yeah. I don't know how they're going to do it, but I do expect the Lakers to find a way to be able to squeeze this one through tonight.
However many hundred playoff games LeBron James has played, I wouldn't say he's looking at this as a must-win. Like I think it would be nice if they could get a split in Denver, but Denver's not a great road team. The Lakers have it figured out offensively. They're just going to have to play defense. So I don't know that there's too much cause for optimism going into today other than saying, well, we know that we can score on this team, but they did not do much at all to figure out any kind of defensive strategy during that game, especially even when they needed it down the stretch. So they came back and Reeves hit some big threes, a bunch in a row to tighten that thing up. But again, I don't think, put it this way, I think if the Lakers lose tonight and the Celtics win tomorrow night, I think both of those series, if you're the Lakers and the Celtics, you feel about the same. Even at 0-2, I think the Lakers can still feel like, it's all right. We're going back home for a couple of games. Before we know it, could be 2-2.
Look, I said from the beginning, and you've heard me say it a bunch of times when we've been up here talking NBA playoffs, the Denver Nuggets are the cleanest team left in the playoffs. And what I mean by that is when you look at how they play the game, when you look at how they're a team where you have to really look really hard to find a serious flaw. Because when you look at them 1 through 5, they can beat you. Their front line is really good. They have a very talented backcourt. They have a superstar in Jokic. They have the kind of team, just kind of when you look at it, they are built to win an NBA championship. My only reservation conversation about really, really getting hard behind them and saying, are they going to win, is the fact that they just don't have that level of experience against the Lakers. The Lakers are a team who has LeBron and AD. They've been there and done that. So you just kind of wonder from a mental aspect, will they have what it takes mentally to stay strong for a 7-game series and be able to beat guys who have done it before? That's the only question I have, honestly.
Right, but when it gets harder and harder, as the teams get better and better, can Michael Porter Jr. and Aaron Gordon, can those guys do something in 7-game series? And it's like for the Lakers, it's like, can Hachimura do something? As you get deeper into the playoffs and the competition gets better, we know LeBron and AD they can always do it. We don't know if Jamal Murray can always do it. We don't know if Jokic can always do it, because the history has shown that they can't, because they haven't gotten to the final. You know, so I think that if this series gets to 2-2, it's a big advantage Lakers, even though 2 of the last 3 games potentially would be in Denver.
Yeah, I agree. Look, I mean, for me, the only reservation about the Denver Nuggets, like you just said, is the experience level. Because
and I think they're thin on the bench. So Bruce Brown's going to have to be really good, and Jeff Green's going to have to find the fountain of youth.
Right, yeah. So that's, you know. So let's jump to what's on your mind. What's on your mind tonight, Fred?
Well, a few things. Big homestand in May for the Braves, you know, because I think that they can create some separation. You know, the Phillies are coming in as part of this homestand. You have the Dodgers coming in. You know, the Dodgers are going to be there at the end, so they'll be a playoff team. And you start with the Mariners. I think the Red Sox just took 2 out of 3 from the Mariners, if I'm not mistaken. So if you can take care of the Mariners, then you get the Dodgers, and then the Phillies. The more distance that you can put between the Braves and the Phillies, the better off you are, because right now the second-place team in the NL East is the Marlins, the third-place team is the Mets, and the fourth-place team is the Phillies. So, but I think most people would say that the Phillies are actually the second most talented team in the division. So that's kind of a big homestand for the Braves. And the only other thing that's on my mind is golf without Tiger Woods, and how you know but I'm sort of interested in this PGA Championship, and you got DeChambeau of all people, you know, atop the leaderboard, at least last I checked, at the PGA. The whole live aspect of it, you know, with the PGA players, I think that one thing live has done is it's magnified the majors, because you're seeing all the guys play. For sure. Yeah. And so you got DeChambeau, and then I think Scotty Scheffler might be in second. And I saw the big thing now with a lot of these guys is how long they spend between shots. And I guess Scotty was spending a long time today. And there's some guys on tour who are not happy about it. But what's on your mind?
What's on my mind is, and I'll make this quick, you know, so we're sort of arguing and debating on social media this morning. Do you think Jimmy Butler is a top 10 player in the NBA?
Night in and night out, regular season, or playoff Jimmy?
Just top 10 players, just overall.
I think he's in the bottom 3 of that, if he is. So I'd say somewhere, you know, I think you could probably go somewhere 8 through 12. You know, and there are some guys who have fallen a little bit, like take Ja, for instance. You know, so like where are you going to put him now as a result of that? But I would say he's toward the bottom of that. In the playoffs, obviously he's a different guy.
It was just really funny because I think he's been kind of one of the most debatable players, because you have a hard time knowing where to put him, because during the regular season he's obviously a totally different player than he is in the postseason. So
he knows when it counts.
All right. Well, it's been fun again. Time goes so fast on these Thursdays, man. Once we get to talking NBA, time goes so fast, and we look up, and now we're being rapped by Brett because the show is over. So, hey, Fred, it's been real. It's been fun, man. And
all right.
I can't wait to get back at it again.
Yeah, we'll see who's right tomorrow on that Lakers prediction.
Later.
See ya.
Yeah.